You're listening to the ESO Network, your station for all things geek.
Check out what's been going on with the Pop Culture Cosmos Show and the PCC Multiverse.
I see the potential for basically like another Netflix kind of paradigm shift where here comes this other major player. They have a ton of resources. Apple could change the way that entertainment is consumed.
They say it's the only time this year that you'll have stars from each brand battling each other. And we know it's not going to be the case, but they like to say that, and more power to them, I guess.
Well, it's a big first step, bringing all those superheroes together. There were definitely some parts of the movie that I really enjoyed, and then there were some parts that I thought just kind of fell short of expectation.
Part of it has to be something to do with how it's being promoted, and this is a thing where audiences do not agree with critics.
That's the Pop Culture Cosmos Show.
And the PCC Multiverse, every week on the Podcast Radio Network and Apple Podcasts.
And check out the show today on the ESO Network.
Hello, and welcome to the Monster Sci-Fi Show Podcast. I am your host, The Monster, back to give you another podcast, but a big podcast for the beginning of March. We are talking about Star Trek Discovery Season 1. And what I mean by we, not just me and my ego, but Mr. Gene is back, as well as Tony from cinemaviewfinder.com is joining the podcast. So we are going to be talking about every single episodes and our thoughts, the high points and low points about the season overall. There are going to be adult conversations and there will be spoilers. So if you have young children, don't let them listen to this. And if you have not seen this Star Trek Discovery series, by all means, don't listen to the podcast again, because we will be spoiling a lot of things. This raises the question about Star Trek Discovery. Will this series be able to live long and prosper? Or will this series basically live short and eat shit? Well, that's where you have to listen to the podcast to find out. So normally I try to keep podcasts about 20 minutes to half an hour, maybe an hour, but we talked about Star Trek Discovery for almost 2 hours, so be prepared to have a long, fun journey with us. So here we go. All right, so with us today, Mr. Gene is back, finally.
Glad to be back.
Finally, the first podcast of 2018.
It's been a busy year so far. Wherever you stumble, you just have trouble getting back up. It's fine. Just how life goes.
And that's the way love goes. No, that's not Jan Jan's song.
Wow.
And joining us again is Tony from Cinema Viewfinder.
Hey, guys.
So we are now in the throes, so to speak, of not talking about just the first 2 episodes of Star Trek Discovery, which we already did that. So if you're interested, there will be a link to that previous episode in which you can hear our thoughts and me complaining about everything. But what we're going to do now is talk then from episode 3 on to episode 15. So we're going to talk about the episodes briefly, and we'll give our thoughts about our likes and dislikes. So some episodes may be a little bit longer than others, but we're going to kind of keep this on a quick clip to kind of keep things moving. So the first episode is Context is for Kings. And basically this is, in some people's opinion, the full start of the Star Trek series is because we now have Burnham on the ship that she's supposed to be, as opposed to the previous ship, the Shinzo, which has been now kind of like not destroyed, but not really working, and Captain Zhuzhou is completely dead, right? For the most part, there were some interesting things that I loved about this episode, and one is that Saru, who is actually probably one of my favorite characters in the entire series, really kind of not necessarily talks down to Burnham, but he says that one line about he will be a better first officer to his captain, unlike what Burnham did to her captain. So I really love that line tremendously. There really wasn't almost anything to complain about. I was intrigued about the Black Alert going on and what the hell is that all about. So there was a lot of interesting stuff that was going on that I'm like, I could maybe like this series from that point on. Considering the first two happened, this felt like a decent way to really get the series going, and maybe it should have started that way as opposed to telling the first two episodes. So what are your thoughts, guys?
Yeah, I agree. I think that this is what we would normally consider the real pilot, and that the other stuff was more like a prologue that we really need, you know, like, I mean, at least at that time, I felt like we didn't really need it. I think later on, once we see the importance that Captain George takes on, that maybe there's a reason for it. But yeah, I like this episode better than the first two.
Yeah, I thought it was interesting because it's a flash forward 6 months. You have the backstory. It's a rich backstory. A little bit unnecessary, but the cool thing is you see some of the crew from the Shinzo over on this ship. You're told what happened over the past 6 months, and you have this mysterious captain and this brand new ship to explore and learn about. I really like the whole. There's a lot of strange, like, I'm sure Easter eggs been meant to get back to, like the black badges, which we don't talk about, you know, and what the heck is Black Alert?
Yeah.
It's not inferred to, but we get to meet, you know, a lot of new characters on the ship, and it's fun. It's a great opening, I think. And Locust fortune cookies. And the Tribble, a lot of eating takes place in this episode. You know, and it's bait. Do you want the bait? Do you want, you know, you keep watching? You just give us $5.99 a month, $9.99 if you don't want that many interruptions. But I don't know, I was hooked from the beginning, so very happy with it.
Yeah, I think one of the interesting things about Lorca is throughout most of the series, he doesn't ever sit down. He is like constantly on the move, standing up, barely sits.
Well, he's a man with a mission. He's got to end the war.
Well, maybe he got space hemorrhoids or something.
I think at this time, before we find out what Lorca's deal really was, I really liked him because it was more of a throwback to the Kirk era captains, you know, more man of action, not necessarily introspective, you know, and so we can talk about that later when we find out, you know, about what we found out about him.
Actually, I would consider him to be more like if Enterprise, the original series, had him instead of Archer, and then Archer was a little bit more the way he was leading up to Kirk, I think it might have been a better switch. Because I think Lorca would be more, because he's not unhinged, but he's less regulated. And because if you go back to the beginning of the Federation, you can have that kind of rogueness in a captain. I thought, you know, by this time, over 100 years, he's kind of a loose cannon. So I find that kind of a bit strange. Not that I didn't like it, but I just think that if you put him back in Enterprise, it would have been more appropriate.
Yeah, let me ask a question. It doesn't take place, it doesn't have anything to do with this episode or this series as of yet, but has the Prime Directive been established yet? Because this takes, place 80 years before, after Enterprise?
About 100 years after
right?
Enterprise.
Yeah.
They talk about Order 1 or whatever it is on the first episode, and I'm like, wait, is that the Prime Directive? Do we have that yet? I wasn't quite sure about that.
Yeah. It's 100 years after Enterprise and 10 years before Kirk.
Okay.
So
thank you for this. I appreciate that.
Which is kind of weird about the whole, I guess, Klingon encounter, considering, again, since you had a lot more interactions with the Klingons on Enterprise, it just seemed kind of like all of a sudden this again, this is more of the Trek lore in the books, was that the first contact was that it was a disaster and it led to the war. So this would kind of play more like happened in the books, but exactly a little bit later than the books, because again, Enterprise had that first contact in Broken Bow episode, the first one. And Archer did a fine job, you know. So I'm just kind of curious, and I'm sure, again, the executive producers really couldn't give two rats farts about, you know, canon in the books because, you know, they're doing a TV series. But I just think us diehards, it was just kind of like a misstep. But again,
I gotta tell you though, like I've heard all the criticisms about canon regarding the show, but when you really look at this show is more full of canon than any of the other shows, except for maybe Deep Space Nine, and I think it's, you know, when they do break canon, they do it for a good reason. But I mean, even the deference that they show Enterprise, which Enterprise is usually the most disliked show among even the fans. But this show has shown a lot of respect towards Enterprise and has really used things from Enterprise as a foundation to build on, you know, for plot points and stuff, like they did with, you know, the references to the in the mirror universe. And things like that, the references to Hoshi,
right,
and Archer, you know. So to me, you know, I don't see this as a disrespectful of canon. I see it as more like these are fans that really do love the show and only break it when they feel like they can do something better. You know?
Yeah, I completely agree with that statement because I mean, I'm enjoying myself a lot. And then I'm watching the Ask Trek shows afterwards, where you have, you know, a cast member, maybe a guest star, and the writers frequently show up on the show. And the fans, you know, they are just so happy to be producing new Trek, to have these new opportunities to go a different direction. And they are all, I mean, they even dressed up with little symbolic things from the show during the holidays, you know, or it was really cute to watch because they're fans of the show. They know what they're trying to do. And the mission, I think, that they were told to do is restart Star Trek, you know, and get people to watch past the paywall, which is a challenge to do. Keep it interesting. You know, I mean, you have a continuous storyline throughout all 15 episodes, or all 13 episodes. It starts the first 2 episodes, and it just keeps going for me. I mean, it's like a 15-hour movie for me. That's something I'm really interested in.
All right, so let's move on to our next episode. Tony, you want to take the lead on this one?
Yeah, so episode 4 is The Butcher's Knife Cares Not for the Lamb's Cry, which is kind of a mouthful of a title. But this one was, of course, the one where Lorca basically assigns Burnham to study the tardigrade creature that they found and figure out I can use the biology as a weapon. But of course, you know, soon they figure out that the tardigrade is the key to making the spore drive work on the Discovery. And the most memorable part of this episode for me was this is the one where Landry got killed, right?
Yes, I believe so.
Yes.
Yes.
Yeah. And that moment was key in establishing the tone that this show was going to take, because I felt like, you know, comparing that to the way other people have died on some of the other shows, like Tasha Yar, for instance, where it was just as much of a sudden death. I mean, like, this one was like a horrific kind of death, you know? And you can see that they were doing that to try to modernize the show and make it more like the kind of show you would think, you'd see on HBO, like the Game of Thrones, something like that. That was a standout moment for me. And also, the way it depicts Lorca even further as kind of a mysterious part of the equation in the whole thing.
Mm-hmm.
I almost feel bad that the focus of the show is Burnham, because I would have loved this show to be built around. He was so interesting a captain, and this episode really kind of stretched the limits of, so how dark is this captain? How far is he willing to go to accomplish his mission? Because it looked like there was nothing that this guy wouldn't do to get things done. What do you guys think about that?
Yeah, I thought it was hysterical and really shocking that, you have Commander Landry, who's played by someone from Star Trek. We got Jamar, I think. I'm sorry if I mispronounced the name. But she's in Battlestar Galactica. She's a great character actress. She can hold her own. We've seen that. And they just have her killed off after like 2 episodes. It was like, what the heck's going on? It was funny because you were looking forward to, having her integrate into the... She gets killed off pretty quickly. And I was like, well, okay, that was really interesting. I didn't see that coming. And the show it's tumbling because no one is safe in this show. I mean, sure, maybe if your name's in the opening credits, I guess. But the thing is, even then, because this is an experiment, an active experiment, at the end of the season, things are going to change for everyone on the show. It was really interesting.
One of the things that
I don't know.
The ending that I was kind of like, I can clarify if I'm off with the events, but Tilly was telling Burnham about to open up this last kind of package from her captain.
Right, that's right.
Right, okay.
Something.
So,
pinging all day long till you open.
So the question is, considering that we've seen the Shinzo kind of like this floating out in space, and it's basically a husk because it's been kind of gutted. Where did this telescope come from? Because we know that was in the captain's her ready room. Thank you. So obviously someone went back into this place and like scooped that up and then attach a message for her to have this. It just seems a little bit kind of preposterous considering how we saw the telescope play out in the first couple episodes, and it just seems kind of out of place for this message about her dead captain playing this episode to Burnham. I just kind of felt it didn't really work for me at all. And again, that's just my problem with Burnham in general, and this coming up, and like I really couldn't care if this was even genuine.
I don't know. I don't either accept. I don't know. You either accept the relationship on the show, or you don't. I mean, at first I was unsure how I felt about Burnham's character.
Right.
Because Burnham's character is the actress is so spot on. She's a human who was raised on Vulcan, and she says things with a very precise inflection, But I'm seeing an actress in the early shows trying to be this character. And it didn't quite get me on board because she could be some hemorrhoid medication or toothpaste, or she would be delivering these lines that are, just human conversations. It's very distant but very precise, the cadence. But then the character, you eventually see the weaknesses in her as the show progresses. She's professional. She's a Starfleet officer. Starfleet's in her blood. She served with Captain Giorgio for 7 years. She's responsible for her death. She's responsible for starting a war. She's responsible for the death of thousands of Starfleet people. She's seemingly altered the timeline that we know of, and it's all her fault. That's a tremendous amount of pressure, and yet she holds together pretty well overall, I think. during the show, and you gradually warm to her. At least that was my feeling.
I think part of it too. I don't have a problem with the character. I do think that the actress is not a great actress, and I thought that about Sonequa Martin Green, even when she was on The Walking Dead. That she has a very limited range. Now it works for this character, and who knows if the character was written to address that, because if you get a human that's been raised in Vulcan, well, they don't have to have a big emotional range,
Right.
For me, the problem is more with the actress, but even with that issue, I think you're right, Gene, that over the course of the season, you really warm up to her because she starts showing some vulnerability.
The future episodes when she says she's never fallen in love, she protects her understand it. But it was amazingly intimate. Like, tell me the one thing, so we have to go all through this bullshit again. Just tell me one thing that would just cut you off and make you believe me instantly. And that was a great solution. And I love his reaction to that. Sorry, I'm so sorry. That's terrible.
Yeah, that's probably the key episode for her.
Right.
When she becomes more sympathetic.
Now, on the same note that you were talking about with the actress, Tony, Fuller, who was supposed to be the executive producer of the series, really liked her. And based on her audition, basically, he had to pretty much delay the series until she was done with The Walking Dead. So I'm just wondering, because she is not really now the two new producers, and I forget their names because they're on After Track a lot, but I'm just wondering if they're just kind of like, to me, it didn't flesh out all the way through. Even when we talk about those moments, which are like, they were genuine, and I like that nice little nuance to the character later on that we see. But overall, I just didn't feel like this is a character that I can relate to or have some kind of endearing feelings for, because it just didn't seem as if she grew. And I'll point out some episodes later on about that, but I just felt that this character, even though she might have been appropriate, just didn't really knock it out of the ballpark. So again, going back to your sentiment, is that she might have been just enough just to do the character some justice, but not like win a lot of people over. So,
but I also think that pairing her up with Tilly was a great idea. I mean,
yes,
we've seen mentor kind of happen on 64, like Riker being Leslie's mentor, which I hated because it never gelled for me.
Right.
But having, Burnham try to mentor Tilly, I thought, and their banter, the comedic banter, was amazing because it really opened things up.
Right, but really,
Tilly's so. Go ahead.
No, I was gonna say, but Tilly's more of the one that's getting her to open up because she's so close up.
Right. Mary Wiseman is such a great actress, and then pairing Burnham up with Tilly is good because Tilly draws her out of her show. So that's effective, and to me, it's as good of a team as maybe even Kirk and Spock, which, I mean, that's hard for me to say, but wow. But I think it's a good team. I'm strictly acting because you've got the one who's more subdued, and then you have the other one who's, very driven by her emotions. But together, they've got a chemistry,
No, I agree. All right, so let's move on to our next episode. Gene, go ahead and take this one.
Okay, the next episode, I believe, is Choose Your Pain, which is basically the introduction of Harry. And it's interesting because we delve into the introduction of a new character. We get to meet, what's his name?
Ash Tyler.
Ash Tyler, thank you. Prisoner Ash Tyler, who has been on this ship for months and it's been tortured, and it's an interesting show. How do we feel about the introduction of Harry Mudd? How do we feel about, what's his name, Rainn Wilson's portrayal of this character? Did we enjoy that? I
didn't love it. It was like,
no, but he's treacherous. He's not as comedic.
No, I mean,
dangerous.
That was actually my problem with it, because I always think of Harry Mudd being that kind of clownish character, and this Harry Mudd is lethal, and I had a little problem believing that. Like why couldn't they do the same story with the other version of Mudd?
Right, but would you say
that would have been interesting?
Would you argue then, like in 10 years, he would change to become that lovable buffoon, if you want to call him that, or something like that? Would you think in 10 years he would change?
I mean, I have trouble seeing how the guy would mellow out that much.
Okay. Well, he probably smoked a couple of triples.
He's screaming for Lorcan's head at the end of the episode when it leaves him behind.
Yeah.
And he curses him.
Yeah. It's not like,
comes out in the future episode, but...
Yeah, so it kind of makes sense why he would later on do what he does to Lorca, so it just seems a little bit more of a vicious streak in him, and Rainn is fine, but I just think the character of Mudd is something that I think a lot of people were looking forward to, but it didn't really pay off the way they thought it would be.
Well, and it goes to something that's one of the few things I have a problem with about the show.
Mm-hmm.
This show is serialized over 15 episodes, and I feel that one of the problems is that rather than letting it unfold organically and see where the story takes them,
mm-hmm.
that sometimes they've already got this outline and they're so determined to stick to the outline that they force some things.
I agree.
And so, for instance, with Harry Mudd, they needed to get to that episode later on where he's going to kill Lorca 57 times. And so in order to do that, they make Harry Mudd like a real evil kind of guy versus the guy that we knew from the original Trek, who was more of a clown,
Right.
To me, that feels like it's something where they're trying to check off a box rather than letting it unfold naturally,
Right.
So there'll be other instances throughout the show where they do that, and that, to me, that points out the detriment of the show. To me, it's like the other way that they tend to do that sometimes is how no matter how the episode is going, they always have to end it in a way that's sort of like a cliffhanger to get you to come back,
Right.
And that kind of thing feels a little bit forced.
Okay. The other big thing.
Can I
Go ahead, Gene.
really quick?
Go ahead, Gene.
I enjoyed this show because I'm paying for it. I want to be constantly entertained. I want my money's worth. I was really impressed with the set design was. It doesn't feel like a soundstage at all. It feels very, cinematographic, very much like a movie, like a modern movie. And that made me really happy. Plus, there are adult themes on it. There's cursing. And I liked that it was a darker universe.
Okay.
And I liked that Harry Mudd gets an edge.
Since you brought up the
No,
cursing,
you don't need to change the character to make the universe darker, because the old series had some really dark stuff going on, and yet they had those paper mache backgrounds and colorful costumes and all that, but there was still some dark stuff going on, like in Charlie X when they make Charlie X disappear, and stuff like that.
He kicks up everyone's face and freezes the people and all that stuff. Yes, I agree.
Okay.
So,
Jane, since you brought up the whole cursing thing, this is the first time Trek has dropped 2 F-bombs on a series. Now, it's not the first time that someone has cursed on the Star Trek series, but this is kind of major. And to me...
Yeah, double dumbass on you does not count.
Or Data, when he's about to crash in Generations, uttering the word shit. So sometimes it's appropriate and it's funny as hell, like when Data does that, or Kirk doing double dumbass on you. But here, I just felt for the love of Christ, you had to put this in there just because. And it wasn't to me like it added something. It was just more like, really, this is what are you going to do? As opposed to a moment in which you can really enjoy the character doing that moment. So again, as much as I love Tilly, this is something I didn't like for her to do. I get her enthusiasm, but I wish, and she does something later on towards the end of the season that she says something similar, which was better than what she said with the F-bomb.
But I was going to say that they're consistent. They give all the curse words to Tilly. So maybe Tilly is just one of those girls, who likes to curse.
I didn't have a problem with that. I was okay with it. It was a little lame in that it's not an outstanding moment, but it is cool. It's a science moment. It's a breakthrough moment, which it's not an expletive. It's not a shit or fuck. It's a fuck. That's cool. You think that's cool? That is cool because of this. It was okay. It was an educational thing to push us through that moment, I guess.
Mm.
Well, and
not how we normally curse.
Right.
And shouldn't they have been cursing like 20 years ago already? Like, it's just like a little too late to be concerned about that. Like, I sort of was glad they finally did it and got it out of the way.
Now,
likewise, it makes it more human, more relatable.
Okay. When you compare that F-bomb versus the BSG F of frack, which is more effective? The actual word or using a substitute?
I mean, the whole thing with frack worked almost because Ronald was, kind of going in on the joke. You know what I mean? Like the fact that was something that they used on the old series, and he was like, "Oh yeah, we can really do this because I'm not allowed to use curse words on this channel." But I don't think that they should be compared. I think they're two different things. Yeah.
But also, that was also done in the original series too. They did use frack.
Yes. But was it? I don't know. They used Merrick in Next Gen.
Yeah, Picard says that a lot.
That was clever.
See, that I give credit for.
And I also like the way that in Serenity, they're cursing in Chinese.
Right.
As well. And then that fit the story very well in that universe.
Or combining Goram. So things like that, I think it's clever rather than the obvious go-to thing. It's like when a comedian tells a joke sometimes it's funnier to do a workaround the thing that you're trying to explain as opposed to being more direct with the joke. So I think that in this case it didn't work for me. So again, it worked for you guys, but again, just not in that level. So
all right, moving on.
We're going to go to episode 6. Is it pronounced Lath or Leith? I'm not sure because he throws me at the end.
Lathy, I think.
Lathy?
Let's say like that lady in the original series.
Okay. All right. So here, one of the things that I was kind of interested in, again, reminding the episode Asher, Ash, Tyler, and Lorca were doing the battle simulation in the ship, and I'm like, this is a little too advanced for my taste, considering, when you had Picard and Riker doing the little sharpshooting scenario, they were just like in a room and it was just shooting little dots flying around. This was like, what the hell? So things like this kind of really irked me more than anything else, is having the tech and stuff that they're doing, it's out of place considering this is supposed to be 10 years before the original series. So regardless of how well the episode is well received, things like this really take me out of the whole episode altogether.
Yeah, I get that, but okay, but look at it from a different perspective. Like, instead of looking at it like, wow, this took place 100 years before Next Generation, and look at the technology, shouldn't we really be looking at it like, hey, that's taking place 200 years from now, and we almost have that technology now to do that.
Yeah. Well,
you know what I'm saying?
Yeah, no, I totally understand. And I'll talk about that at the end of all the episodes, because there is something that you do want to bring back, which is that issue. So things have changed since then. So we'll talk about that. But again, for this episode...
If I'm wrong, were you not irked, Monty, as I recall, by I think this is the episode where they're running and they've got the disco shirts on.
I'm sorry, the what?
Am I wrong? I think this is the episode where Burnham and Tilly are jogging through the ship with the disco shirts. That drove you crazy, I think.
I thought that was... No, you're right. Yes, this is the disco shirt dancing sequence that I hated.
You were so upset over that. Like, it's cool, merchandising.
Yeah, which, I'm okay with the merchandising. I wanted the DS9 Niners baseball jersey when they did a baseball episode on the holodeck. So here I'm like, well, that disco could be for anything now. I guess STD is just too on the nose, to be misconstrued.
Yep, we're not doing that.
Yeah, but disco is like the coolest
thing
about that show. Like, the fact that they would call it disco, like, to me, that makes it even cooler, because then I'm like, wow, that's funny that they would call it disco, and now I feel like calling it Star Trek Disco all the time.
No, disco's dead, man. Disco is dead.
Well, come on, right now we can watch the Discovery Channel.
yeah, let's not get that confused. And then, of course, we also have another moment, Lorca and Cornwell sleeping together, which, he gets her kind of drunk, but then we find out how kind of paranoid Lorca is the next day. He's having a phaser underneath his pillow, which is kind of interesting.
Yeah. There's a reason for that.
Yeah, exactly. But, I just think... It's okay. It's fine for what it is. But again, I'm just not feeling anything. Tilly is fine. Ash, I was starting to like a bit because of what he's been through. And later on, there's a great episode for him that I'm like, that is an interesting angle. But again, Burnham doesn't do anything for me at this point to kind of make me be more interested. So again, there are things that I could start liking in the series. Despite all the objections, there are moments in which this is good. But then it goes nowhere after that when you try to put in Burnham and make this work around her.
This was an interesting episode. This was what do you call it, a mind-meld episode with Sarek.
Yeah.
I like that. I mean,
I was going to say that.
There's a lot in each episode.
I was going to say that this episode, with that at the center of a story, I think shows the kind of stuff that Discovery does really well with canon, which is here we finally get, after 50 years, an explanation as to why Sarek has had this feud with Spock, which is basically that he chose Spock over to go into the Vulcan Academy, and then Spock turned around and decided to join Starfleet, and it only made Sarek's guilt over the way he treated Burnham worse, you know? And to me, that was like, I was like, wow, that is such a great way of giving depth to that feud between him and Spock that, you know, we've known about for all these, but we never really understood why. This was a really good reason why, you know? What do you guys think about that?
That's very true. I think that adds a lot of depth to it. It certainly does that, and it adds more character for Sarek's character. I thought it was interesting that, you know, the entire episode, she keeps coming back to him, and he does the stylish Vulcan martial arts, which I didn't know he could do.
I can do without kung fu chopping Vulcans.
Hey, he could do that. Let me point out, as Mr. Continuity, that they stated that he could do that in the very first episode he appeared in Journey to Babel.
Babel? Okay.
Yeah, they said that he could do the Vulcan martial arts.
Okay. Now, because I'm pretty sure you guys haven't read the Desperate Hours, the Star Trek Discovery novel.
I haven't read it yet.
Okay. So there is a moment.
I haven't read it yet.
There is a moment in which Spock and Burnham meet and they talk, and there was a thing about that moment that you talked about Spock entering Starfleet versus Burnham going into the Vulcan Academy. And I think the impression that I got is that Burnham did what Sarek wanted because Spock did his thing. So it wasn't that. I just felt like it was a result of Spock doing his thing that Burnham felt compelled to honor or go with Sarek's wishes to be in the Vulcan Academy. So, and we'll talk about the book a little bit later because it does play in at the very end about that. But I took away, after reading this, a different scenario from that episode. So I'm not sure if it's just a different point of view that someone's telling that.
All right. So there's that.
So no, that's what I'm saying is that I'm looking at that as, but in the book, again, not that, well, it's going to be used part of the series, but it was interesting enough that was talked about in the very beginning of the storyline when the two met, because they had to do whatever mission, and then Spock asked, about Burnham's relationship to Sarek, and it just felt like she'll do what she's been told, unlike Spock, who just did what he wanted to do. So that's where I get that.
Yeah, I did like the way that Sarek comes in and out like out of over 4 episodes, and the way their relationship deepens. They do have an emotional bond, and he's very respectful because they mind melds with her later on in the show, gets to know her experiences, and gives good advice about love. I thought, which she hadn't experienced before,
right?
Which I thought was really great and great character building. I thought as well.
All right. So let's go on to the next episode. Go ahead and take that away, Tony.
So the next episode is Magic to Make the Sanest Man Go Mad, which I'm wondering why Monty gave me all the episodes with the long titles. But
I gotta speak Greek in a minute. I don't know Latin.
But I'm gonna say that this is one of the 2 best episodes of the season.
Mm-hmm.
This episode is the one where we get the time loop,
right?
Caused by Mudd trying to take revenge on Lorca, and take my issues with Mudd in the last episode he appeared in. In this episode, I had made my peace that, okay, well, this is the Mudd we're going to get. And as long as you accept that, then this episode's great. Because he is a real threat to these guys. in a way that the Klingons have not proved to be at this point.
Mm-hmm.
And they come up with a lot of clever scenes to further the story along so that the time loop feels more exciting than some of the other time loop episodes we've seen in Star Trek, the cause and effect, and I'm trying to remember some other ones, but in this episode, I mean, we get a lot of great things. Like, we see the Discovery crew, like, partying, and they're playing Wyclef Jean at the party, and, and you get Ash and Burnham, like, the things of the beginning of a relationship, and you get that great scene that Gene mentioned earlier where Burnham reveals her big secret to Stamets.
What would you never do? But we've been going through this timeline over and over again, and we have to reveal it. I thought that was very interesting. It's just, warm experience bedfellows kind of thing.
Right. She did it for a really important reason that was, going to save the ship. She didn't just do it as a trifle, and we also get those two great death scenes. The first one where Mudd murders Ash with that weapon.
The most painful way to die ever.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. And then that equally great scene where Burnham decides to swallow that weapon, herself. I just thought that this episode really had a lot going for it. I mean, even down to the detail of having Mudd come on board wearing an Andorian space helmet, and it's so goofy looking because it's got the space for the antennas, and then you've got the Gormagander creature, which makes a cameo, and then later on we hear about it again, in a nastier circumstances in the last episode. I just this was about as perfect as an episode of Discovery could be. I don't know. What did you guys think?
Monty, you want to go first?
Sure. One of the problems that I've had for most of the series is that because if you're a casual viewer of Discovery, if you missed an episode, you're screwed. There's very little standalone episodes in which you can watch one and be done. This probably felt more like the classic Trek episodes, again with the time loop, which was fantastic. And finally, there was a lot of humor in there because of what Mudd was doing and having to kill Lorca in so many different fashions. I just loved.
That was great. I love that scene.
So, in a way of hating Discovery, I'm loving this episode because of killing Lorca over and over again. So, that's where I'm like, again, there are moments in which you do great stuff, and then it kind of goes away. But this is probably one of the better and stronger episodes for the whole entire season that I can actually, if I'm going to watch it out of order, I can watch this out of order.
Well, you're right. What's good about the episode is not only that it fits well into the larger story, but that it is a self-contained episode that you can watch by itself and still enjoy.
There weren't that many standalones in this series on this season, I don't think. I mean, there was this one and there's the next one. There's kind of standalone, but they all pretty much fit together. They run together like a well-programmed show, I thought. And you needed the origin of Mudd about that third episode or fourth episode to see before you knew what the heck was fun. But I also think part of the magic of the way the show is being presented is it's being presented on a weekly basis, and you can watch them all. You can binge watch them. I don't think this is ever going to be broadcast out of order. I don't think so. I think they're always going to be set up whole seasons together.
Yeah.
I don't think it's easy to watch just an episode on the fly.
Yeah, and I just don't think people watch shows like that anymore. People do binge watch shows,
Yes, it's a constant hobby of people. You get sick, you get the flu. What are you gonna do? You gonna sit there and watch TV all
As
day
long as you don't die from the
Yeah,
flu.
But I don't know. I was. What do you think about this? Because what if you'd never seen Star Trek before, and this was your first exposure to Star Trek? You've heard of it, you know about its history, but vaguely. Would this show make you watch more Star Trek and get you into it, and then you put it with the rest of it? Because it's kind of timed, you know, for eras, different timelines, different decades and such? Or do you think that this would win you over overall?
Oh, for sure. I think that this is a way of bringing people to watch the other shows. Like I'm a lurker on the Reddit, the subreddit for Star Trek, and I hear a lot of people discussing the show. And you got your older fans like us, that,
Monty,
you know. Well, yeah, a lot of them, Monty, that don't like the shows for a lot of the same reasons. But then you've got the fans who have never seen any Star Trek show before this, and this show is enticing them to watch other shows, particularly Enterprise and the original series, you know, which I think is great. You know, that's anything that'll get them into Star Trek as a whole, I'm happy with.
Okay. All right, let's move on to the next episode. So go ahead, Gene.
All right, the next episode is Si Vis Pacem Para Bellum. I said that being poorly.
Better than me.
This is an interesting episode, basically where Burnham, Tyler, and Saru go down to a planet. They do an away mission to talk to try and see about some crystalline transmitter thing. Basically, they're trying to help them create that sonar to find hidden Klingon ships. And basically, it's time for Burnham and Tyler to spend time together. And it's a Saru episode, basically, because Saru's mind, he keeps saying this noise that won't go away, and the aliens on the planet basically do some changes, which I thought was, yeah, okay, this is a weird episode. This wasn't quite my favorite, although it was still fascinating to me. What did you guys think?
I thought this episode was weaker than it should have been. Like, I was that the fact that it was a Saru episode and that it was the first episode to shoot on location,
right?
I felt like, wow, okay, we're gonna finally get a landing party and this will be fun. But I felt this was one of those episodes, like what I was saying before, that it's designed to check off so many boxes in the story that they forget to just enjoy themselves for what it is, you know? And so, like, you have all these things that need to happen for the story to move along, like, you know, using that transmitter to get, you know, to get the Klingon ships out there, and, you know, Saru going to do that weird kind of hypnosis or whatever.
Yeah,
in order.
And then changing character completely, and like, give me your communicators. All right, here you go. He crushes them, and like, you're not going to talk to them. That is very out of character. I'm not buying this. I don't know what's going on, but it show's got another 20 minutes, so I'll just keep watching. See how they resolve it. I know, I guess too. It's all right.
You know, I
a
thought
lot of CGI in this episode. So go ahead.
No, I was going to say that, you know, I was happy to have something happen on a planet. Saru's going to be in a landing party. So I'm like, fantastic. But then, like you said, Tony, they just checked into certain things about, well, let's get a character who is going to be under the influence, that's not going to be acting like themselves. And you saw this with Spock, or other episodes where characters are under the influence of some agent that they breathe in, and they're not themselves, but yet they're in command or put the mission in danger. And I'm like, it really didn't pay off at all. No matter how much I like watching Saru and I love the way he walks and just want to see that happen, you know, I'm just waiting for those moments to happen, and just it's just very frustrating to get to that point that I'm like, you dying to get something that's different and see if they can add more to a character, and it's just not in this episode. So that's my frustration.
Right, this wasn't my favorite episode.
Yeah.
So.
All right. So let's move on to episode number 9, Into the Forest I Go. Now, this one is one of, not the whole episode was great, but there are moments in here that I'm just absolutely convinced if this is the direction you're going to do, something brand new, and that's going to be with a PTSD for Tyler. Because in this episode, he has this problem with Laurel, who was supposedly his prisoner, her prisoner. And he flashes back to those moments in which he felt unable to act because of what she did to him. And this was going to be a really interesting angle because, one, aside from the torture, the moment of, well, they had a relationship, which to me, he got along with it, but he did it out of survival. And I thought that is going to be really interesting because that has never been done from a male perspective. It's always the woman who has to do whatever she can to survive, even in engaging in sexual acts. But to do this for a guy, that I thought, holy crap, that's amazing. So if they're going to do something different and do something that's going to push the envelope on a more adult level, this was the episode. This was the episode, including our first Klingon booby nudity shots that I'm like... So
yes, they were there. They flashed by, and you were like, "Wait!"
And I froze that frame.
Quickly,
That whole thing that you just said about the male being raped, basically, is then undone because then you realize, John, that it wasn't raped; it was consensual. Because he used to be Vok.
Right.
Spoilers. Yeah. You should have had a spoiler warning before, but yeah.
The whole review of spoilers.
I know. Now, you put that in your beginning, but okay.
So that's the undercutting.
And that's what I was going to ask you guys. By this point, didn't you guys already know for a few episodes that Tyler must be Vok?
You suspected, but you weren't sure. I thought it might be possible, but I'm like, they can't do that. Can they do that? The answer is yes. Clearly,
but then when you see this episode, you're like, okay, he's Vok.
Well,
but it's so obvious then. You know what I mean? It's just, but they're not pointing at it directly. They're flashing it to you.
I mean, Vok stopped appearing before Ash Tyler appeared.
I know. But then I was still confused. But then how could that happen? How could?
And then he's having flashbacks in this episode of having his skin peeled off. You know, like.
I'm sure the editor was like, "Okay, I got to show this, but I can't show too much."
Right? Had they
here's the other thing. You guys got to explain to me: is he Vok, or does he just have Vok's memory, or what? Because I thought that they were showing actual surgery being done on Vok to turn him into this guy, and then I hear no, they just
put him in
Tyler. Right, and to me that feels almost like a cop out. Like they decided, we gotta do this instead because that way we can still have Tyler.
Right. No.
We can have our Tyler and he too, you know what I mean?
We'll talk about that.
Yeah, there's some gray areas there. Like, did Tyler exist before? Yes, I assume he did because this background for him in Starfleet. We knew that Vok existed, and that gets really confusing in the Mirror episodes when he sees himself and he freaks out. Like, What's going on? I don't understand.
Yeah.
But, dialogue keeps going. The dialogue, okay, as long as the writers know what's going on, you can watch it again and figure it out. It was okay. Kind of, I thought, a cut and paste episode kind of thing, that not quite clear, but not quite like the whole DS9 thing when you're talking to this woman who's back in time, that goes through the atmosphere, and she's been dead for years, but the radio waves travel through the atmosphere, and they're all saying there at the end of the episode, like, that's the solution? Okay, we said your lines, that's it. And now we can give a tribute to her. Like, that was pretty lame. I knew it, but I don't know.
Oh, and then, of course...
So this was the mid-season finale. What do you guys think of the way they ended the show?
Well, I was going to talk about that because, Stamets had to do this one last, 131 jumps? So it was like, all right, I'll do this one last time. And then, of course, Lorca at the last jump, the second to last, I think, changed one of the coordinates, and then that got us into that whole mirror universe, which I don't want to go into just yet. But I thought, okay, we kind of knew this was going on. I forget which episode we saw Stamets brushing his teeth, and as he walked away, the image of Stamets was there, just looking at the other Stamets walking away. So we knew that was kind of coming. So I'm kind of sort of happy that was happening, but on the same token, I'm kind of sad that it was happening, because to me, I thought it was too early to do that kind of fun story. Although it was great, I thought it was way too early to do this season. So,
but they didn't tell us that they were in the mirror universe till they came back.
Yeah, exactly.
Somewhere else.
Correct.
They're not sure.
Correct.
Then the season finale, then the next season starts, it goes from there.
Right. So Tony.
Snowballs.
Right. So I'm sorry. Go ahead, Gene.
No, go ahead.
All right. Well, Tony, go ahead and take on episode 10.
Episode 10 is Despite Yourself, directed by Jonathan Frakes.
Yay. Go Thunderbirds.
It's the first one that fully takes place in the mirror universe. And I gotta say, I mean, I had the same issue that you had, Monty, where I thought that they shot that mirror universe thing too soon into the show. So it felt a little like fan service.
Yeah.
However, the same way I felt about Mud, I'll say that as long as you accept, okay, they're going to do the mirror universe, this is a pretty good mirror universe episode. And I say that as somebody who has never liked the mirror universe. Like, I've always thought the mirror universe, was fun for that first time we saw it on the original, but I hated how Deep Space Nine made it like a regular annual episode.
Mm-hmm.
And everyone's a lesbian for sex appeal. You're like, wait, what?
Yeah,
that's weird.
but this show really did some interesting things with it. I liked, for example, the lighting in the mirror universe is a lot darker, which explains why they all have trouble with light, like Lorca does. And I liked the costuming. I thought the costuming was like miles ahead of any of the other costumes they've done for the mirror universe before. And I really liked that the mirror version of Tilly is Captain Killy.
Yeah.
I love that. I love that so much. He says very often, I'm captain someday, I'll tell you what. Sure enough, there you are.
I mean, in a way, that kind of crystallizes what I like about this show, which is that they go darker, but they also find humor in the show, and the humor is like a natural kind of humor that comes out of the events. It's not forced, because I gotta say, like, those Berman shows, I'm always gonna leave Space Nine out, because I feel like Berman turned his back on Deep Space Nine, and it only helped it, But those Berman shows were so humorless, and here I thought that this was really like a fun episode to watch. Like, what did you guys think about this one?
Go ahead, James.
Ooh, this for me was a roller coaster ride. I was happy. I was amused. I was frightened when Tyler kills, oh God, Hugh, Dan's lover. I was like, that completely caught me off guard. I didn't think they could do that, and I gasped because I had no idea what was going on, and I was like, no, but he's been like 3 or 4 shows in. He's an established character. He had the first gay kiss on the show, and he's a character. You can't. But yeah, you can. And then all of a sudden we were like, okay, but this is like Game of Thrones. No one's safe. And indeed, towards the end of this, no one's really safe. But I was like, wow, this is just, it really kept me involved. And I know that maybe the Mirror Universe may be fan service, but this is my favorite time through the Mirror Universe. I was fascinated by the whole thing. The roles that Kelpians play in later episodes. I was like, wow, that's kind of fucked up. It was wow. I think this is how you properly use the Mirror Universe. You put a threat to it, you give it an edge, and again, so many seeds have been scattered throughout the previous episodes. I mean, have you guys started rewatching the show yet?
Yeah. I did it this morning from the beginning.
It is immediately rewatchable, I think. The first 2 episodes are a little tough to get by, but then it reestablishes the relationship between Burnham and Giorgio. Even though, she saves Giorgio from the Mirror Universe. The Mirror Universe version, you're like, well, that's the dumbest idea. But you get it in the first 2 episodes, I think, why she had to do that. Because she didn't want to see her die again. Too close.
Go ahead.
Monty, I wanted to ask you, what did you think about them killing off the Culber? Because I'm asking you that in the context of how there's this whole movement of people size shows for doing what they call burying their gays.
Yeah, that's a thing. I agree. In which you kill off the gay companion, the lover, and it's been done too many times. Now, with Culber, the problem lies is that I didn't feel anything for Culber to begin with. He was always in the background. He had a couple of moments with Stamets, but I never felt any kind of connection that I'm like, oh my God, I really love this character, and I'm sad that he's gone. I would have been upset if it was Tilly. You kill her, I'm losing it. But with him, I'm just okay. I'm sorry that it happened, but honestly, it was one of those things like, oh, he's gonna come back like the end of the episode, still alive or something. You're like, no. But it just didn't resonate for me. And to me, the biggest problem that I had, I'm talking about Tilly, fine, she's now the captain, Killy. Did she ever get used in this episode other than get dressed? That one time? That's it. And again, my frustration, you do something interesting with a character like her, you don't do anything with her. Saru gets plenty of things that you start, but you don't go anywhere with them. So again, at this point, I'm really getting frustrated with a lot of good things that they've started, but don't go anywhere. And at least with here, the Mirror Universe, and goes into the next one, there is some interplay that Burnham is doing that I'm like, I kind of get what she's trying to do and her inner workings, and I'm kind of warming up to her by this time. But it's only because it's the Mirror Universe, so everything's all fucked up to begin with. So it's how you make sense out of that universe that I find fascinating, not because of her, but because of the whole situation. So
I don't know. I liked Hugh. I mean, Hugh's only crime is that he's too smart. I mean, Ash goes to him and says, look, my brain's fucked up. I'm having flashbacks. I know what's going on. this isn't that. And Hugh does his research. And I love that Hugh's just trying to do his job. You know, he's like, no, I can't be bothered with it. I got to go to the Waymaker. He's like, you're not going anywhere until I clear you. Right. You know, and that fear makes him instinctively feel, you know, Dr. Culver. And you're like, what the fuck? It was startling to me. It was one of the greater moments for me on the show because I was completely taken by surprise by it, that rarely happens.
Right.
You know, because I'm always trying to predict, I'm always on top of things, but to have something like this happen, to have a minor character killed off suddenly, and there's no coming back from that. You know, one of your main characters just killed another character. That's it. He's not going to be on the show much longer because they can't forgive that. You know, I like the way that Hughes Beth just kind of hovers on the outskirts of like the next 2 or 3 episodes because it's devastating. But Stamps never really gets to mourn during this season, I thought, which was strange.
Yeah, that's another thing that I felt. You know, he doesn't have that closure-ish. I mean, towards the end of the season, we do get a moment, but I'm like, you know, he has a confrontation ultimately, but doesn't really have that moment of to move on. He's always going to have that pain, so that's kind of weird that he didn't get that moment to close. But let's move on to the next episode, Gene.
The next episode is The Wolf Inside, which basically it's Burnham somehow managed to cut her way onto the SS Shinzo, and basically coordinates with the resistance leadership to try and make a plan. Basically, though, it's Burnham Prime playing Burnham Mirror, taking Tyler with her for some reason. I didn't think that he was fit for duty, but he's there too. And they basically get to meet mirror counterparts of strange alien creatures, like Vok, like Sarak, the beard. And then at the end, the twist ending is that Mirror Giorgio is still in this universe.
Yeah.
And she is.
Go ahead. I'm sorry. It just keeps going.
No, I'm asking you, and she is what in this universe?
Well, the Emperor. I beg your pardon. The Emperor. Yeah. Emperor Giorgio. Which was okay. What did you guys think?
Go ahead, Tony.
I mean, I really liked the introduction of Giorgio. I thought it was a surprise to me because I was like, okay, they're gonna surprise us. So who would we be surprised by?
Yeah,
Giorgio. You know,
Giorgio, of course.
But
he was the only person you could do. Really, I mean, we were thinking maybe Hoshi, but she could be a descendant from Hoshi, I guess. Who's I think in the Enterprise universe, she plays something major as well, but I don't know.
Yeah. But I mean, like, you know, like I said before, like I like this mirror universe better than I have before. So I really thought, you know, that this one was a pretty good episode. I will say that it almost felt like a filler episode, like a placeholder, because you know, we could have easily taken it out and just skipped to this one and not really missed it. There wasn't really much development here except for Tyler getting stirred up by meeting the other bloke.
Right.
I would say for me, the highlights is seeing the rebels, basically the Endurians, the Tellarites, the Vulcans. Right. They all look fantastic, and it wasn't as if, you know, they looked that strange from their counterparts on the other TV series. They looked even better, but I'm like, see, you guys can still do.
I know they look just as good as the Klingons.
Yeah. So it was like, I like that kind of makeup in which you can incorporate different alien races, since really up to that point, it's only been kind of Klingons and really haven't done anyone else. So it's kind of refreshing to get off the ship, even though it is a mirror universe, to have something a little bit more different as far as storytelling. Going back to Discovery, one of the little nitpicks that I have is like, okay, well, we got to rebrand the entire ship, so they got to repaint the whole thing, and I'm like, Jesus Christ, really? You had to do this? Why?
What did you guys think about that? The way that this show has a second ending, in a weird way. The way that they tie the universe, a second ending, almost. Like you climax, you finish with Lorca, you know, and then you've got 2 more episodes left, you know, and it was like, well, this is, I don't know where I'm going to go. I mean, there's real clips with that in the episode. I don't know how I felt about it. I still don't know, because it was like, oh, yes, we're back in our universe. Hooray! We don't have a captain anymore, and we've got Philippa, and it's 9 months later, and we've lost.
Dude, did you just skip over 2 episodes?
No, I did, but we're spoiling, so I'm just... what do you guys feel about that, though? I'm curious.
Yeah, I mean, the Sopranos used to do that. The Sopranos used to build up to the end of the season, and, like, the high point would be the episode before the last one.
Yeah.
And then the last one was sort of like, so you could regroup a little bit. And I kind of am all right with that, because it's like a novel, you know what I mean? Like the chapter before the end is where the climax is, and then the end is sort of like just to kind of gather yourself up before the story ends, you know, like. Mm-hmm.
So in other words, timing. You don't want to blow the wad first, but I'm like, but yay, what another ending? So yeah, I think I was ecstatic seeing Philippa again. And then immediately I started thinking, are they really going to connect to Enterprise? And it goes back to what you were talking about, Tony. And I don't think they ever did make a connection to Yoshi, right? They never made any kind of connection.
They did.
They talked about the Defiant. They talked about the Defiant, but they never said that Philippa is descendant.
No, they did in her name. When they say her full name as the Emperor, there's a reference to Hoshpi in her name.
Okay, but
let me look it up while you guys talk.
Okay, but because I was thinking, it's like, if they did that and they're connecting to Enterprise, then I'm like, thank you for giving me this little boner to make me happy. Because, you know, one of the few people that watched season 4, that since it was all fan service and they gave us that Mirror episode, Yoshi became like, you know, the Emperor at the end. I'm like, are they really going to do that? And they're going to acknowledge what had happened? They did briefly with the Defiant. So I'm like really happy that happened. But to me, I don't think they made that connection. But nonetheless, I thought, I'm good. I'm kind of good with this. And we can move on from there. While Tony's still looking up, let's go up to number 12, which is Vaulting Ambition. So we're still basically on in the Mirror universe. And I think...
Hey, I found...
Okay, well, what did you find?
So her full name, and I'll explain the part that refers to Hoshi, because I heard the writer talking about this. So you know that Philippa Georgiou, just like Michelle Yeoh in real life, is Malaysian, okay? But Hoshi is Japanese. And when they introduce the Emperor, they say her name is Her Most Imperial Majesty, Mother of the Fatherland, Overlord of Vulcan, Dominus of Kronos, Regina Andor, Sir Giorgio, Augustus, Japonius, Centaurus. Now, that Japonius part is Latin for Japanese. And what the writer of the show said was that since we know that Giorgio is not Japanese, then she named herself that as a tribute to her previous emperor, which was Hoshi Sato.
Okay, so not necessarily a direct descendant, but just acknowledging that's my favorite guy. I'm going to name myself after.
It's a really deep in joke,
Okay.
but it's there nonetheless.
Okay. Okay, I'll go with it. So,
I don't think you should did.
so going back to episode 12, Vaulting Ambition. Still in the Mirror universe, and what I can ultimately say about this episode is probably the most disturbing thing about this episode is the soup that JoJo and Burnham share, and she just says Burnham's like, the soup is okay, and Philippa offers, here, try this. And it's the ganglia from the Kelpian that she chose. Absolutely horrified. And my mouth dropped in like utter disbelief that happened. And I'm like, again, moments that like that blew me away. So I applaud them for going that extra mile to go really dark in a dark place in the Mirror universe, but that was really my favorite moment there.
But what about the Klingons eating JoJo's body that comes out in episode 4? I think
that's pretty good. That was pretty good too.
I mean, that was dark as heck. I was like, what? Yeah, because she had to leave the body behind. She didn't want to. You know, her last effort is to run. No, I'm not leaving it behind. And then
yeah,
what happened?
But they got hungry an hour later.
Fuck. Wow. No. Malaysian, not Chinese. But
the opinions of this host are not necessarily the opinions of the other hosts.
But that also leads me to the question, how did she get Philippa's comm badge? If she had to leave, I don't know.
Yeah.
I think she got it before she left. I think they showed it.
Okay. So we watched it.
But wait, what about the fidget spinner?
The fidget spinner, Tony? I'm missing something. When?
Yeah, don't you remember on Vaulting, the episode Monty is talking about? That's the one where Giorgio, the mirror Giorgio, kills her whole court with the fidget spinner.
And it sends it out.
Right.
Yeah.
Like Monty's like Blade. Yes.
That was great. I thought that was a great moment too.
So,
and she killed them just for listening.
Yeah. So, again, you take a character that was so-so in the beginning, and you really gave her something to kind of work with, and you can make her devious as hell. And I almost relished that. So I was happy with her.
I don't know. I prefer the original Philippa, but she's dead, so this is okay. But I some of the choices. It's Mirror universe. I'm glad she got back, but things we did with the character are a little strange. Bring it back to the Prime universe, and then what they did, I was like, okay. I don't know, but we'll get there in a bit.
Okay, Tony, your thoughts?
Like I said, I mean, the episode had some good moments, but I still feel like they were stretching the Mirror universe plot a little too long.
They really did like for 3 or 4 episodes, right?
Yeah, you still got another one after this, yeah.
Yeah. I think it was a good 4 episodes, and I feel like you could have done it in 2, But
okay, go ahead. But the interesting is that these episodes do whatever they want. They can make them as long as they want to, just like Game of Thrones, I guess. Finish the story.
Well, but I'm saying that there's not much story there. Like there's more atmosphere, and maybe that's the point, to let it breathe a little bit. But I mean, but I feel like, okay, we get it. We're in the Mirror universe. This is Giorgio, and she's bad, and whatever. I mean, the main event that we're waiting for is, Lorca revealing himself.
Right.
And I I just feel like they waited too long for that. You know?
Well, but I don't know, because the thing is, it's got different subplots, because we completely haven't discussed all these not in the plots too much. I mean, the Ash Tucker thing, I mean, he goes on a break for an episode or two, but then the whole that's going on behind the scenes. You know, we had mentioned that in previous episodes, she finds Cornwell, who's been captured by the Klingons. She simply dies. Cornwell dies, but then, miraculously still alive. That was poor writing, but fine. Whatever. And then they capture Laurel. And it's during these episodes, in the background, that Laurel removes the Vought personality out of Tyler, which was good. And I thought, okay. But it's a subplot, but it becomes more major later on. Just to line it all up, I guess.
Mm. Okay. Well, let's move on, because we're trying to get through. We got a couple more episodes to go. So, Tony, go ahead and take on number 13.
What's past is prologue. I'm glad I got this one, because for me, this was the second most satisfying episode of the season, because it finally tied up a bunch of plot developments in one neat little bow. Now, you know, the most important one, of course, is that here we finally see Lorca, you know, reveal himself fully as the Mirror Universe Lorca, and show us how evil he is and all the machinations he was trying to work out to get Burnham back and whatnot. Now, I gotta say that I would have preferred for Lorca not to be a Mirror Universe character, because to me, it was more interesting to have a captain like Lorca who was not a purely heroic captain, you know, someone who was more Machiavellian. But, you know, but I do have to say that Jason Isaacs' performance of Lorca is fantastic, and it's one of the things that kept bringing me to the show week after week, and I feel like I'm going to miss not having that character there on the show. So I'm hoping that somehow we find the original Lorca out there somewhere. But, I mean, this was a great episode in terms of special effects, with the destruction of the giant ship, the Emperor, and the only drawback to that, and I don't know how you guys feel about it, you know, these are giant ships in these shows, you know, whether it's the Discovery or that other ship, and yet it always feels like they've got like a crew of 12.
Mm-hmm.
Do you guys feel like that?
Yeah, it's like watching Andromeda, and you have like a ship that's meant for like 5,000 people, and yet like 6 people can run it.
Yeah, I mean, there were like more people in 10 Forward than there were in like the whole Mirror Universe ship that was the size of a city, you know? Sometimes you can see that in the episodes, you know, but overall, I thought this was a really good episode, and I really liked the way they killed off Stamets and, you know, the Mirror Stamets and the Mirror Lorca, and then that development at the end where they steal the Emperor back to the regular universe. Like, I don't know. I thought those were interesting twists. What do you guys think?
Go ahead, James.
I really... Go ahead, Mikey, I'm sorry?
No, go ahead. Go ahead.
I thought it was great. It was great storytelling. You know, I liked the way they seeded the entire show for rewatchability. Like, look, he's not eating kelpian, I don't think, but he's eating like octopus in one of the episodes. And his aversion to bright lights, you know, his whole thing about how did we get to the Mirror Universe? He could have done it from his chair, because the whole show is it's got all these little needle points we've woven through it. It's brilliant. It's like that. And yeah, I like the way that oh gosh, what's her name from Galactus back for
Rebecca Shaw.
Right. Landry's back. Mirror Landry's back. And I love the way that God, in the next, well, no, it's the next episode, never mind, but the Kelpians, you know, I like the way that Saru saves Burnham from Tyler.
Yeah.
In these episodes. I liked it a lot. It all fit together very well for me. It was really compelling television for me. Nancy?
Yeah, for me, it was just like, all right, fine, we're tying it up because we're got to leave the Mirror universe. So I was happy to see Jason Isaacs burn like hell in a brilliant way. And I could have done without the fighting with the pew pew lasers after a while. I'm like, okay. But my question was, you know, again, it's just more of the logistics of how the hell did the evil Mirror universe Lorca get into our universe, and why didn't he use Discovery as that vehicle to attack the Emperor's ship, as opposed to, if that's all he needed to do is just get back to the Mirror universe. I just think that he had all this opportunity to use Discovery to his disposal, as opposed to using Burnham and sticking him aboard as a decoy. It's just, again, a wasted opportunity, because you have, you know, Captain Killy doing fuck all nothing, and the Enterprise just rebranded itself as the ISS Discovery, doing fuck all nothing, and it was just like, what's the whole point? So it didn't feel like it was satisfying enough for him to do what he did, other than saving his crew, fine, but they all wound up dying anyway, so it was just like all for nothing. So I'm just like, fine, let's go on. We still got more storyline to go to. So
he does have a point. You know, I didn't know if I bought the whole, wait, so Lorca's in love with Mira Burnham,
yeah.
So he treats her special because he wants her to be here. And even though he tells Burnham, like, this isn't your Giorgio, I think earlier on in one of the episodes, it's weird to me that he would make that same mistake.
Yeah.
You know, but, okay, I don't know, there is a little bit of kind of the suspension of disbelief that you have to go with.
Right.
With the show at points, I think.
Okay, so let's move on to episode number 14, Gene.
Is that me?
Yeah.
Okay, so we leave the Mirror universe, and Discovery manages to jump back to its original Prime universe, and is immediately boarded by Cornwell and Sarek, and they learn basically that the Federation has lost the war, and nearly lost the war, and that a third of the fleet has been wiped out, and that the Klingons are now basically in control of Federation space. And so, as a souvenir from the Mirror universe, you've got Empress Giorgio that Burnham has managed to hitch onto and bring back to the Prime universe. And yeah, let's go on from there, I guess. Yep. Yeah, Tyler's now completely cleansed of the Vok personality, but he is now in control of himself. But he has all the memories, conveniently, of Klingon leader, I guess.
Go ahead, Tony.
Me, I don't know. I don't really have much to say about this one. Why don't we just start the next one? That's the one I want to cover.
All right. Well, for me, throwing in my 2 cents, it just felt like, okay, we still need to get our Spore network together. So I have this idea, and like 5 minutes, it's starting to work, and we're going to gas up our car. And then off we go into the finale with using Giorgio as the person that's going to win the battle, since we jumped 9 months into the war and appears that Starfleet and Federation are just losing. they have to basically go a different route that they never thought about, and that's going to be the destruction of the Klingon homeworld, Kronos. So I'm like, okay, if that's the way they're going to do this, fine. But refresh my memory, if this episode ended with Jojo now being the captain of Discovery.
Right. Surprise!
Right.
You didn't tell me. You just threw her on the bridge.
Right.
Right.
So, as opposed to being a consultant, everyone's pretending for her to be the captain, who was supposedly dead. That just made no sense whatsoever for everyone to start taking orders from her. In the next episode, she was being a real bitch to everyone. But that's not because she's, a woman. It's because that's the way she directs people. She doesn't like anything that's not of her nature and likes to be more direct. But that's what it just kind of irked me more than anything else. Yes, I want to see her be there. Of course, she actually leads the mission. But it was just more about the logic. Don't tell anybody in Starfleet that we're doing this, but I'm going to put you in charge. That I'm just like, come on. Really?
Well, and I was afraid that this meant that we were going to have a mirror captain for the rest of the series, or at least for a good year or something.
Right, exactly. And we can't tell the secret. That kind of crap, So, all right, so let's go into the last episode.
That too, but
yeah, let's go.
I was like, this show will do anything now, so.
Yeah, it killed Lorca. On our way to Vulcan, supposedly to pick up our new captain.
Yeah.
And then this shit happened.
Right, so let's go into episode 15, the season finale. Will you take my hand? All right, so the only positive thing that I can say about this and the whole scheme of things is that if you look at episode 1 and episode 15, it does serve as a bookend. Burnham tries to end conflict with violence, whereas at the end, she tries to use diplomacy and use logic to kind of diffuse the conflict at the end. So if there is any character arc, we're supposed to believe throughout the whole series that she's come to the conclusion that she's reached this place of whatever that is, that she is now enlightened. So she saves the day at the very end because she convinces Laurel to take this bomb that's in Kronos, make her the leader, and bring the 24 houses all together. Starfleet then rewards Burnham with making her basically she's enlisted again, and then expunge her record. Never mind about the thousands or the millions of people that were killed in this war. That's no longer a thing. I just thought, you know what? That's way too much. Way too much. I can understand her being reinstated back in Starfleet because of what she did, but she should still have this record that every once in a while will bring that up and throw her in her face. I don't think you can expunge that kind of red, so to speak, off your ledger. So who wants to take that?
Well, I mean, she did save the entire Federation. It was virtually wiped out by the Klingons. So,
Then the Federation.
I mean, she broke the plate, but she kind of glued the plate back together. So you can see her getting it, and she also had all the dirt on how the admirals were ready to freaking break the Prime Directive and destroy a planet. So there were a lot of reasons you could hide behind her doing that.
So basically, it was a cover-up?
Remember the last time we did the podcast that I called this was how the show was going to end?
Uh-huh.
That Burnham was going to have to commit mutiny to save the show, the same way that she caused all the problems by committing mutiny?
Well, in fairness, she did it on her own. That's the difference. In the first episode, she did it on her own. Whereas in this episode, she pleaded her case against the Admiral, but the crew around her also supported her. So she wasn't alone in this.
Yeah,
so,
she got a consensus, yeah.
So that's the only difference between the two. So if there's going to be, again, a bookend, you have that.
Yeah, it was like a real arc.
Right. I don't believe it was a successful arc, but you do have a difference in Burnham at the end as opposed to the beginning.
Yeah.
Gene, what are your thoughts?
Yeah, Mike, you're right. You're right. It is a lot. It is a lot to swallow. It's a strange solution because it's a season finale, and you're expecting explosions. You're expecting this great war, but no, you don't. Instead there's Orion's on Kronos in a little strange little cantina village kind of thing. They're allowed to stay there. It's a lot to swallow, and then you're closing up storylines. Ash has to leave. It's a lot. But it's okay because the thing is that the show has to reimagine itself and fix the it's opened up. So okay, this is what we got. It's not perfect,
right?
But it solves the problem.
But you know what? But you know what? This is where it probably would have worked better for them to spend less time in the mirror universe and devote more of those episodes to tying the story up, because this sort of felt rushed, like
I don't know how
like they had to get back to the Klingon War really quick and tie that up,
right, and finish up in 2 episodes.
Right, that it would have been better had they only spent 2 episodes in the mirror universe and then taken 4 episodes to get to where L'Orel is in charge of the house,
Yeah.
But it's a hard thing to do.
It kind of seemed a little bit rushed to have L'Orel go from the brig to being the Chancellor of the High Council, in 1 episode.
I agree, but I think also that, okay, so in Revenge of the Sith, Anakin has to become Darth Vader, and Padme has to die, and all that stuff. Just lame writing that it all just kind of collates together. You know what I mean? You're like,
but
that's a movie. There's different pacing.
No. In fairness, you knew what it had to do before because you had a story afterwards. Here, you don't know what's going to happen for season 2, so they could have really spent a little time doing what they needed to do to get this finale done a little better. And I know you have to, finish up your storylines, but as Tony pointed out, they could have done 1 last episode or 2 episodes less in Mirror Universe and then finish up with the war. Now, one of the criticisms that I had about this season is that if the war is such an issue, except for episode 2, which there was a major battle at the Binary Stars, I don't remember much in the way of conflicts or interactions with the Klingons directly on that level. So we never really saw the war on that level, correct? Okay. Except for Burnham getting redemption. What's the guy's name? She fought the Klingon and she won basically a fight. Remember that she jumped off the ledge and then they beamed her out. So she got Philippa's
Cole.
Yeah, she got Philippa's comm badge back. So she was able to kind of redeem herself, or at least get that image back, or that processional item back so that she felt like I did the right thing and fighting the Klingon and so forth. So, unlike DS9, in which the war with the Dominion was really in the background, and you felt that more because they did every once in a while have a fight in space that was spectacular. Here, it didn't feel like this was a major war. It was just like there's this major conflict, and then nothing else happened except 9 months later we're losing the war. So I didn't feel a sense of Klingons were really, going to kick our ass. So that was my only criticism overall. It's just this conflict started out interesting, but it never really materialized as a major threat. So, but let's move on to the big reveal, which unfortunately, since I didn't see the finale until I saw the image, and that's the last shot of which we see the USS Enterprise meeting up with Discovery. So, what were your thoughts about seeing the Enterprise?
Tony, you should take this one. I think
The finale?
No, the last shot of.
Right. So what did I think about that?
Yeah.
I thought, man, just when I'm finding all this stuff wrong with the show, they gotta go and pull that shit. That was so sweet and satisfying to see that happen, that it virtually erased any problems I had with the show. I was like, oh, this is cool. It made me feel like a little kid again to see that. Now, what that means for a second season, I'm not exactly sure. But if I were to speculate, which you said we were going to speculate at the end
we
here,
will.
I would like them to do what we think they're going to do, but not exactly. So for instance, okay, cool, we're going to get to meet Spock. Well, what if Spock has already transferred off of this ship? Because this takes place a few years after the Cage. There's nothing to say that Spock stayed on the Enterprise continuously until Kirk arrived. He could have transferred elsewhere in the meantime. So what if we find out Spock's not on the ship anymore? What if we find out that the real story is going to be the navigator of the ship, which I don't know if you guys remember, but the navigator's name was Jose Tyler. And Jose Tyler might have something he wants to find out about his brother, Ash Tyler. Or what if we find out that the reason the Enterprise is meeting up with them is to transfer the new captain on board, and the new captain is the lady number one, Captain Pike's number one.
Major Barrett.
Yeah, Major Barrett.
They gonna dig her up?
Well, I'm just saying, there's a lot of stuff that they could do with this. Or, another thing they could do, which I would love to see, I don't think that there's ever been, and I don't know why I was thinking about this, but I don't think that they've ever done a story in any of the novels or even a fan story about how Captain Pike got injured to the point where he had to go in that wheelchair. Maybe that's something they could explore this season, They did say, the writers did say on the after track that this was going to be a Captain Pike sort of season. So maybe there's a season-long arc devoted to him,
But you would then have to put Spock kind of in there because Spock plays a role with Pike. And I don't think, from what I gather from Aftertrack, that it will be part of the season as far as their direction, but not be the focus of. So I'm just wondering. Yeah, it'll be enough of a tease, but to me,
does Spock have to be part of it?
I think somewhere, at least the initial meeting. But that's the thing that I wanted to bring up. Because I contacted the writer of Desperate Hours. And I wrote him an email. And he was super nice to respond like within a minute that I wrote it. Because he wrote this book. He went to the producers before the series was going on. How do you want me to make this tech work of Discovery versus the original series? And he explained it in a way that made sense. Is that, well, some ships were built newer than others. And I'm putting it in the terms of my library. My library that I'm at was built back in the 70s. Whereas you would have newer libraries that were just built within the last 10 years. So the newer ones basically look much better than they would do, otherwise. So you can have ships of different varying technologies. Because his idea was, I'm going to somehow make everything all blend together. Old and new. Holodeck or no holodeck. Holograms walking on the ship, on other ships or no. He's going to make it all work. I'm like, fine. That's what got me interested to read his book. But in the book, those two characters, Spock and Burnham, did meet. So I had asked him, do you think, considering that you went to the producers ahead of time to write this story, if they're going to at least acknowledge what you did in your book, as far as this is not the first meeting? And his was like, I don't know what they're going to do for season 2. I hope they do, because to me, it's like out of fairness, he did them a solid. They could at least acknowledge him in his book of what they've met before. So this took place with Captain Georgiou and that storyline before Discovery. So, but going back to the Enterprise, one of the things that I mentioned in the last podcast is like how I can get behind the show now is that they have to retcon the whole look of the show. If the Klingons look like this now, fine, the Klingons look like this now. If the technology is going to be updated, fine. Because when I looked at Aftertright, Alex Kurtzman said, he wanted to go for the look that was done in the movies on a TV scale. So if that's what he's going to go with, then everything else has to look like that. Not to the same degree as what you see on Discovery, but it has to look more updated. So when we see that Enterprise, that's like that's the motion picture Star Trek Enterprise that I remember. That kind of updated look. Not the original 60s stuff, which if you're not going to do that, fine. But if you're going to update it, then you have to make sure that everything has to be updated. So you have to have that look across the board, or at least varying degrees that this is the universe now. So that's the only way I can get behind to even rewatch the series. So when I did that this morning, I was like, I can do this. I can be at peace with the last anger that I had towards this series with this technology look of this series versus the original series. Because technically, if you want to play by this rule, there is no original series yet. We'll get there in 10 years, but that's going to be an updated look. So, enough of me chiming in. So, Gene, go ahead and talk.
Yeah, let me follow your rant.
Sorry.
I don't know. They finally get to do something that we haven't seen, which is great. Fine. They did things we haven't seen, but it pissed off so many people, a lot of the retro fans, which it's fine. Sorry. But it's all about, we haven't had new Trek on television for like over 12 years now. I'm really thrilled with the show. I think that they're trying to do new things, making things. There is canon in here, not quite perfect for what you want. But for me, I'm thrilled with this. I'm just so happy to have Trek back. I'm happy to have a new ship that's interesting. I'm happy to have a new crew that's better than the crew of Enterprise. Sorry. But I'm really happy with the show. And without you, Monty, I wouldn't have done this. We got the first episode free. You shared your subscription, thank you. And then I went and subscribed on my own.
Yeah.
It blew me away. I was really happy with it. And I'm happy to pay $5.99 for this. And I'm rewatching it. I'm happy to do it now. It's not a problem anymore because I believe in the product now. And it's bigger. It's a lot better than I think previous Treks, in my opinion. And I'm glad to have it. When it comes out on DVD or Blu-ray, I'm going to get that too, and just dork out. And it's the thing to me is that there's so much out there right now. This is a great gamble for CBS to do. Disney's going to be doing it again, hopefully soon, and so is DC. But you got to get your content together. This is really risky. You have one show, one original show, and the background stuff. It was an interesting gamble. I think it worked. I hope it does. I hope
it's just one show.
I know, but they have the library. They have this new show.
No. I'm saying that that this is not the only original show they have on that channel.
No, there's the Good Fights.
There's the Good Fight, and there's that other comedy show with Tim.
And they're going to do the new Twilight Zone by Jordan Peele.
Yeah.
Eventually, with time.
Yeah.
Yeah, but I think it's a good start overall for this pioneering step. I think I don't know the numbers.
It's better than a good start. They said they publicized some of the numbers. I mean, not the numbers, but they were publishing some measuring stick saying that this show was even more talked about online than Walking Dead. And Walking Dead's the number one show on TV.
Right. But I think it's both good and bad. Not necessarily it was all good. It was just mostly talked about. So it got fans.
But it's still a measuring stick about how many people are watching it, whether it's good or bad.
Right. Just like Bright.
But talking about it, but they have Netflix anyway. It's subscribed anyway. But I don't know. I worry about the subscription on this because I will cancel my subscription shortly after I rewatch this show.
Right, and that's the thing.
In a year and a half or a year when it comes back, I'll resubscribe. But I don't know how they're going to make that. Is that sustainable for them? Because there are a lot of cancellations on this show.
Les Movies. I'm not sure if that's his last name. The guy who had CBS talked about that, saying that yes, the shows that we have is for a much older demographic, but the draw of Discovery is that we have a new demographic that's 20 years younger. But as you mentioned, after you watched it and possibly rewatched it, what are you going to do until then? Because I think they start production again in April, but we're not going to see it until 2019. So we'll stop maybe about a month from now or two, and then almost a year, you won't have a subscription. So I think that's dangerous when you don't have enough shows, like if you're doing like Disney or for DC, when you start a brand new streaming service, you need to have shows that plays to that kind of demographic, not lure fans in and hoping that they stay. I don't see you, Gene, staying on CBS All Access to watch, Blue Blood or CSI Miami.
I won't.
Yeah. So that's.
But one of these scenarios I was thinking after we saw the Enterprise is I was just thinking about that very same thing, about how they need more shows to fill out their schedule, more shows in the same demographic, like you're saying.
Yeah.
And I was like, wouldn't it be interesting if they would want to spin off a Pike era Enterprise show? Like, because you could do that. I mean, and in fact, that might have been something that Brian Fuller originally pitched, and they said, well, no, we don't want to do that for X, Y, and Z reason. But, it, TV is weird, and anything that gets high ratings gets consideration. So,
Right.
and I can tell you that people are going to tune in to see the Pike Enterprise, storyline, whatever that is.
Right.
So who knows,
Okay. Well, I think, we can still go on and talk about this to the nth degree, like we always can. But I want to basically move on to our last point to talk about the future of Star Trek as far as in the movies. The last note that we've heard was that Quentin Tarantino was interested in doing a Star Trek movie, and to boot, a rated R movie. So right now there is a writer from the Reverend that is looking to do this project with him. But the question is, your thoughts about Quentin, Star Trek, and that movie being R-rated, and in light of the problems that happened on set with Kill Bill 2 with Uma Thurman, what are your thoughts about him possibly still doing this project after that? So let's start with you, Tony.
So what is it?
The question is about Quentin in general. What are your thoughts about him doing a Star Trek movie?
I think that people are reading a little bit too literally into that. His involvement in this movie is purely going to be as a producer and not a director. Even if he's saying right now that that's his intention, I feel that ultimately he will pull back because it's just not something that would fit into his career. Like, he certainly likes Star Trek, and he certainly knows about it because he has inserted lines about Star Trek in other movies, like in Crimson Tide when he did the polish on the script. He
did the Silver Surfer thing, which is great. I love that.
Yeah. And he stuck a reference to Star Trek in there too, so now I think that his role in this would maybe be to break the story and then produce it, but I think he would hand it off to somebody else to direct. So I don't think he will have as direct involvement as we suspect. But I think that it's fine that they want to, adult up the movie the same way they're trying to adult up the show, because I think it's the only way that Star Trek is going to survive is if it keeps, evolving into whatever the popular entertainment is at that time.
Okay.
Yeah, I tend to agree. If they were going to sign them, they would have signed them already. It's in the work. It's in creative limbo right now. The important thing with Star Trek Beyond was they hit the 50th anniversary, which they did. Now you've got an ongoing TV series that's gotten a lot of people's attention. I don't think you need a new Star Trek movie at this time. You can do it if you want to with the current cast, but they've had their 3 movies. Bringing back for a 4th movie, that gets done, like the Mission Impossible movies, but it gets rarely done. I think it's just publicity at this point, but it's just creative ideas floating in the wind. You want to do that? It's like, let's see if you can actually do that. I think that's actually going to happen. The way that everyone's saying, oh no, he's going to do it, he's going to write a weird story, he's going to direct. It's probably not going to happen that way. It's taking too long. It's just ideas floating in the wind again, in my opinion.
And how do you think the original plan fits in? Because do you think you guys heard that the original plan was they had signed Chris Hemsworth to come back?
Yes.
For Star Trek 4, what you want to call it?
Right, against Chris.
And do you think that is something that Tarantino was going to work into his story, or was he going to go off in a different direction?
I think because of what I've read, and he likes 2 specific episodes one from the original series, The City on Edge Forever, and then the next gen, the Yesterday's Enterprise, in which they're dealing with time related issues. So if he's looking to do this, and in retrospect of bringing back Kirk's dad, I think, and this is going a little bit beyond the movies, but if Paramount is going to be coming back to Viacom, and the two are going to be merging back together as one, meaning that we may not have a Kelvin timeline anymore, he may just kind of wrap it up so that it kind of merges back to the original timeline of what we know now for the movies, to be like with Star Trek 2 and all that fun stuff. So if that's what it is, I can see bringing back Chris Hemsworth to kind of fix that time issue, to make things go back to the way it should be, meaning that he does survive and does not get killed in the very beginning, and then all that Kelvin timeline is now a thing of the past. So I'm thinking that's how you kind of solve getting rid of the Kelvin timeline.
You read my mind. That's exactly what I was thinking. I was thinking exactly what you said, that now the timing of Viacom and CBS joining back together again made me think, oh, it'd be great if this sort of ends that whole arc of the Kelvin timeline and makes it like a little self-contained arc.
Yeah.
By having Kirk have to go back through time and save his dad,
Right.
That would be brilliant. And then we still got Shatner that wants to get back.
Yeah. So
I love Shatner, but fuck Shatner. He's a prima donna.
There you go.
Well,
at least he's keeping busy.
Yeah, that's true.
Sabotage.
Don't correct me. Oh my god!
You guys have heard that, right?
Yes, I heard the video. The tape on that. It's hysterical. But it's not as bad as Riker saying, the charade. Let's end this charade.
Yeah, end this charade.
And then
the next week when
he's so straight.
Live, I was like, it's like, wait, he said the other way in the preview. What the heck?
Yeah, let's end this charade. Shut up, Will. All right.
I wouldn't mind seeing a Tarantino Star Trek though. Like I would love to see what he does to it.
Yeah.
I've always thought like Star Trek is now enough that it could be like a different take on it from different directors and sort of be like a real anthology the way Fuller envisioned it.
Yeah, or
should be for the Discovery show.
Yeah, or even Cloverfield to a degree. You're able to tell different stories from different directors, but still, that was the other thing too, that I think they should be expanding more than just focusing on these characters. I mean, you can still have them all interconnected, but honestly, it's like the problem like with Star Wars. If you're just doing Skywalker stuff, the whole lineage, after a while, you're going to get bored as hell. So you need to kind of tell different stories. Star Wars Rebels is a great point to bring up, because you don't know any of these characters, but they're in that universe, and you kind of dig what you're doing. So Star Trek really kind of has to kind of break out.
Now that you say that, that was a missed opportunity for Discovery that I thought about. After they went into the mirror universe, it was like, oh my God, what if this show is about something that they haven't done before, and that would be really interesting, which is, what if the spore drive is the Discovery to get lost in space, like lost in dimensions, you know what I mean?
Oh,
and they keep having to... They keep trying to get back to their original dimension.
But that's kind of Voyager-ish.
Right, like Voyager. Like, instead of coming back to their original dimension, they keep ending up further away in different alternate dimensions. So you could be in the mirror universe and then end up in an alternate dimension where the Borg, have taken over completely. And that way you could explore, like an analogy would, like different storylines, but also you could break canon as much as you want because everything could be an alternate dimension. You get what I'm saying?
I totally agree.
Mm-hmm.
In fact,
I thought that's where they were going with it. It's like, oh my God, that would be cool. And then they ended up coming back and
right, and in fact, they can find a planet of apes.
Yeah. Or they could find a galaxy far, far away.
Or a space station that's on the moon that happened back in 1999. Which that was actually my fan fiction story for my fanzine for episode, my second fanzine, that I was going to have Kirk and Commander Koenig meet together. But it never happened. So...
Or they could show that scene again where Tilly says fuck, but this time she says frack, and you're like...
No, I think you can definitely have fun with that if that's what they would like to have done. Because anything that we liked, well, there's even stranger shit that's out there. And like you said, push canon aside and just go balls out. That would be amazing. Because then you really have... really nothing to tie your crew to any principles other than finding a way out of this mess. Because even though Voyager kind of should have been, well, we're in the Delta Quadrant, fuck all the rules. We got to do whatever we need to do to get out of there. But, you play by the rules, and it's honorable, but that also gets you into a lot more trouble. So, I don't know. There's pros and cons to either side. All right, but enough of me yammering on, and we've been on way too longer than I expected, so I do apologize to you guys. But it's been a great conversation talking about Star Trek Discovery. So I thank you both for staying up late with me.
Thank you.
And
I'll be back, my dude.
And yes, I'm very happy to have you back because you are actually, as I mentioned before in my podcast, in one of our reviews, people want you back. So we need to get you back onto the podcast. So
it's creepy.
It is, but they said more Gene, please. So
more Mr. Gene.
But I got to see Star Trek Discovery. Not happy with it overall, but I still had moments in which it made me happy, at least for the bit that I liked to watch season 2.
But wait, I'm not hanging up until you admit
that
this first season is better than most of the other first seasons, with the possible exception of original series.
I thought about that. I thought about all the other series and how even DS9, the first season, was just god-awful. But it was nothing like what we saw here. In the sense of... Okay, Enterprise did an arc season. Probably the only one that it purposely went out saying, we got to do a single story. As opposed to the standalone episodes, which was something that I was expecting, but maybe that's the problem of many Trek fans, is that we wanted the exact same thing, maybe a little different, but when you go too different, that's not what we want. So I have to kind of unbreak my expectation. So having gone through all this, and just like with all other problems with movies or TV shows that I hated at first, when I give it a second viewing and talk about this at length with you guys, then I get to be a little bit at ease with my objections. So, like I said, the Klingons are not an issue now. The tech is not an issue now. The paywall is not an issue now. So now it's just when I go back to rewatch it, I'm rewatching it and we'll have those moments again, and maybe I missed something and still find some joy in that.
Fine.
But even
Monty,
with that...
I hope you learn to love it.
Huh?
I love this show. I love it so much. I like it better than any of the previous Star Treks I've seen. And I'm surprised to find myself saying that, because I was a really big Next Gen fan. Because Next Gen filled gaps in my sci-fi knowledge. You know, there was nothing like that back then. But this is for a new generation, and I'm on board with it. For me, it doesn't have to fit canon and continuity. I mean, you're going to get that stuff in there. It's going to be and chopped up in little bits in there. It's never going to be perfect. But I'm really excited about this show. It makes me happy. I look forward to watching this show just like I look forward to watching previous seasons of Doctor Who. You know, it's exciting. Plus the fact they had a continuous storyline. Really, really nice. Really like that a lot. Very happy with it.
Fair enough point. All right, so basically that's going to be the end of our Star Trek Season 1 season review. So if you have any questions, comments, or concerns, you can email all of us at my email at monsterscifishow@gmail.com. You can follow me on the various social networks. So again, thank you to listening to us and to the Monster Sci-Fi Show. It's sci-fi from a certain point of view. Good night.
This has been a broadcast of the ESO Network, your station for all things geek, classic, current, and beyond. Be part of the crew at ESONetwork.com.